Hey there, YouTube. So this is going to be part 3 here on the rebuild of the 298. I've got the bottom end all set. I actually had to go in there a second time. I realized on the last video where the little white plug goes on the oil pump. And also it was a good thing I took the oil pump back off because the spring actually came off the seal for the crankshaft. So that was kind of lucky that I had to get back in there and I fixed that. So that's all set. And if guy commented there, don't know your name, but this is the oil pump here. There's a this is the brass worm gear that you'd be looking for that would be stripped out if your oil pump isn't working. There's also internal gears in here that can be stripped out too. These are metal or steel. A little more unlikely, you know, obviously that's why that's brass, but you know, you definitely want to check that out. And the white little plug goes on the end of the oil pump that fell off that last video. All right, so that's out of the way. So knowing I had some seal problems, I'm going to pressure test this saw. I think that's kind of a good thing to show anyhow. And I don't need to put the piston on yet for that. But obviously this episode I'm going to get the piston set, show you what to do with rings, what you got to check, what you got to look for on cylinders. And I've got a little work to do on my muffler. I just learned how to braze. It's not very pretty. I'm not that great at it, but I just had to fix some cracks. This muffler got crushed at some point. Had to braze all that up. You don't have to melt the base metal, so this is a really good option and a good thing to learn for this. And so I just want to show you here, because it got crushed in, this whole flange got, it's like cup shaped, so it won't make a good sealing surface. So what I do, I find a good file that's flat, and I run it across that a couple times. And I find where my high spots are, which you can see here. This area is the high spot where the bolts go through, and right here where I ground is actually the low spot. So I'm going to fill that in with a little brazing material, bronze, and I'm going to grind that down and flatten it with the file before I get to pressure testing it, because I need something good to seal against it. And instead of making like a plate and all that. And all right, let's get going. All right, so for a quick little brazing tip here, I'm using bronze rods I got from Tractor Supply. They're 3/32 rods that are with no flux, and I've got some flux powder, which I haven't quite completely got this down yet using the flux, but part number 770119. I'm using a Purox torch with a number 15 tip, which is pretty big. I think it's actually a little too big for what I'm doing here, but it does get it hot enough, which sometimes it's that seems to be an issue, is not getting the metal hot. I've got my acetylene set to about 4 or 5 pounds, and same with my oxygen. All right. And a good tip I found on YouTube there with brazing, if you get your rods short, you can just braze them together and piece them and make a new rod out of them. Or I'll take the short piece and I'll just braze it right to my rod I'm going to start using here. I don't get my flame too big on these. You kind of hear it rushing a little bit. Right there. It's not going too hot. I don't get too much of a rushing noise. I get it down to where it's a neutral flame. Having a little issues with my oxygen. Here, it's not really rushing too much. I don't know if you can see that. I'm just going to get down to my low spots here. Going to kind of preheat the metal a little bit. Probably not going to be able to see much of this process because I don't have fancy equipment here. Just kind of got to learn how to keep your arms steady here. Try to get comfortable. I'm not in a good position myself, but keep the rod out. I'm going to heat it a little bit, get a little flux going on it. Don't need that much. Try to keep the flame straight. Just need a dull red. I'm not very steady right now, I can tell you that. Maybe just a touch more flux. Dip it and leave. Just a little more dip. Do the same on the other side. It's not going to take a whole hell of a lot here. You don't need to get the metal that hot, just dull red, not cherry. Don't get it too hot either, because you're going to lose control of it. I notice if I don't have my flame getting my acetylene real hot here, I'll get that popping. So it looks all right. I might need to do it again, but meanwhile, while it's cooling, I'm going to do some other stuff. Okay, so before I get the piston and jug installed, I want to talk a little bit about scuffing these up or using flex hones or deglazers. You're not really honing, because honing is actually taking metal away. A brush hone, one of these, you can use these. I've definitely seen a lot of guys do them, but you really should be using an aluminum oxide 240 grit on Nicosil. This should be chrome, and it's not really in that great of shape. I don't think I can really get you in here good. There's one spot in here by a transfer up in here. It's I can't really get you good lighting in here. It's an old cylinder, so it's not wore out, but it just needs a little cross hatching in there. And I bought these. They're silicon carbide 160 grit. I think they're a little too aggressive for what I want to do, even going in and out kind of quick. Especially on this old cylinder, I just want to be careful. So I've got an aluminum oxide. I don't know the grit on this. Not a Scotch-Brite, but I forgot what you call this stuff. I can't think of it right now. But I've got it set up on a mandrel here, and it's kind of like on a flapper, so when it goes around, it doesn't put a lot of pressure on the cylinder. So I'm just going to show you what I do here. You can probably do this by hand. Still got my glasses on. So I just kind of stick it in here. Way too fast. Alright, well, if you do it, make sure you got your Dremel turned down. I kind of just let the flapper do the work. Just kind of go up and down in a circle here. I'm just putting a light cross hatching on these. They don't need much. You can also use a type of Scotch-Brite on these. and it's just get a tiny bit of cross hatching. You don't need a lot. Let's see if I can show you here. It's not very significant, but it's something. You can definitely see where the exhaust side's kind of wore in a little bit. All the chrome's still there. I'm just going to kind of get that glazing off. Just kind of go up and down. You're not really going to wear the chrome off on these. I'm not trying to get any grooves or anything taken out, because whatever grooves are in there, they're going to stay in. Not really going to hurt the saw's performance much, but you'll be alright, especially trying to rebuild junk saws. Not really for a customer, it's just for me, so nothing I really need to stand by. And the other thing is, I'm not trying to take any old transfer out, so I'm not really getting in there for serious grinding and stuff. So I put a little cross hatching in. I started doing a little bit by hand. You got to be really light with these. You don't need that much like a cast iron cylinder, because the cast iron wears out against the rings, and where this is chrome, it's a lot harder. And you know, you're wearing your rings out more than you are the cross hatching to make a seal. So anyhow, one thing that's kind of overlooked if you're rebuilding, and something you should just check, you kind of can't guarantee that brand new set of rings are going to fit in perfectly. It's kind of like a spark plug, where a lot of people will just take a spark plug and throw it in a saw where it could have been dropped, and I have seen this. I've gotten brand new ones where they've been dropped and they're crushed. You got to check the gap, and that's what we're going to be checking here. This is the ring end gap, which is this gap between the ends. So just like that, ring end gap. So what you want to do is you want to put your ring in. I guess it probably doesn't really matter up or down, but you just got to get it fitted in here. And I got to find my piston again. Right here. You take the head of your piston to square up the ring, and you set your ring kind of so it goes in between your transfers, or right between all of that. All right. If you want, you want to check the bottom of the cylinder and the top of the cylinder. Now your rings will go as far down as the transfer ports, really, or just below the transfers on most saws. So that's as far down as you really need to check. So I'll go to about that point, or just above the lower transfers. All right, see that's the lower transfer here, just above that port. That's as far as these rings go down. You take a feeler gauge and get a 5/1000 feeler, and a 15 feeler out. That's your limits right there. It's a good safe zone. It's not cut and dry for every saw, but that's where you want to be. So I got a 15, and I got a 5/1000 right here. All right. So here's the deal. If a 5/1000 fits, which my 5/1000 fits, no binding, that's, you don't want any of that. If it binds, that means you're gonna have to file them a little bit. All right? That means it's under 5. So they're gonna be too tight. Then, so we know it's more than 5. So then I'll take a 15 and make sure a 15 doesn't fit. So I'm going in my feeler gauge. My 15 doesn't fit. So I know it's between 15 and 5/1000 of an inch. That's in spec, because if it's more than 15, it's probably a little too wide. Not to say you can't get away with it, but those are the tolerances, 5 to 15 thousandths. And so you want to check the bottom of the cylinder, and if you can check the top of the cylinder and get the ring out, that's a that's the other right way to do this. Kind of just like a V8 or whatever normal engine you would do. So I'm checking the bottom. 5 fits. I can already tell that the 15 isn't going to fit. Yeah, that doesn't fit, so that's good. All right, and you want to check both of your rings. So I'm checking the second set of rings here. I'm good there. Go down a little farther. I mean, on a chrome cylinder, they're really not going to wear that much to where you're going to be that far out of spec. They shouldn't be. Go down a little farther. And it's just, this isn't 100% necessary for kind of like a home builder, but this is just a good practice to get into checking this type of stuff. The farther down you get, it's a little tougher to pull these out. If you pull them out straight, you shouldn't have a problem. They shouldn't bend or break or nothing. A good ring will snap. A bad ring will bend. That's another. You can take them and twist them, and if they bend and stay in that position, they're toast. That's another old trick. Now, the same thing with pistons, and this is from I'm taking this out of a book I have read actually on 2-strokes. And you don't want, if you set a ring in, let's just put them on right now. I got these cleaned up. Actually, one thing I'm going to do here while I'm talking to you about this type of stuff, this isn't really for dressing rings, but the ends of the rings here have real sharp edges. So if you take a stone, not really a file, but this is a sharpener stone, it's like Arkansas, and you just want to touch that up, take the burrs off the ends, because they can lead to scoring. Yeah, this stone's good enough to take these burrs off. It's actually working. I can see it actually. This is one of those things people don't really show you or teach or show on YouTube much. It's just that little extra step you can take on your own saw just to be a little more careful. It's not that I'm taking material up between the ends of the rings either. I'm just putting a chamfer on them with a stone. All right, so they're not so sharp. I can just take these and put them on with my hands. So I'll get the first ring on here. You know, and if your rings don't fit, you just get a file or something and dress them a little bit. I got that set of rings on. Make sure you put them on the right way so the pin, you can see there's like a indentation on the ring here for the pin. If you don't know that already, same with the bottom. And this is the exhaust side, and those pins will ride on the cylinder wall. They won't come into contact with any of the transfer ports or nothing like that. All right, so where I was getting at before, I actually have a 1.5 thousandths, 15 thousandths feeler gauge. I guess I don't have a thousandths. It's a little strange, but that's kind of what you need. You only need a 1/1000th feeler gauge and a 2/1000. One thing you can check too to see if your pistons wore out is the up and down motion of the rings. You want to slide a feeler gauge in there. You should be able to get a 1/1000 feeler gauge in between the ring lands. If you get 2/1000 or more, your pistons wore out. All right, I can just barely get a 1.5 thousandths feeler gauge in there, so they're good. All right, if you're getting like 3/1000 or more, the pistons wore out. All right, so I'm just going to oil the bottom end one more time before I keep going here. I already have my wrist pin in this. I'm trying not to break the old wrist pin or bend it, because you can bend those and get them all screwed up. This one isn't pressed in too bad. It's got a pretty good fit actually. I'm using an old wrist pin bearing for now. I'm going to put a little oil on the small end of the rod. Put a little bit on the bearing. Kind of set it up here where I can get it. I'm going to put a little oil on each side of the piston here where the wrist pin rides in. I've got a clip on one side already, all right, and you have an arrow which always points towards the exhaust side, which is right here. So this is the exhaust side where we're at here. Maybe I'll bring it over here so you can see it. And I've got to, because this bar is in the way, let's get that bearing in there before we forget it. We're going to fix our wrist pin clip over here. It's too far to the up the barrel. You kind of want it on the bottom here to keep the weight down, not up, because they can spin and come loose. That one I know is seated pretty good. And then I'm going to find my wrist pin bearing here. Or sorry, wrist pin. And I'm going to give this a quick lube job. Help it slide in a little better. I'm just using 2-stroke oil here, just for pre-lube. You don't have to use some heavy-duty oil like you would on a normal big engine. I just kind of get it set down in here. And you just stick it through. Sometimes you can't get them in with your hands. Sometimes you got to use a hammer and kind of be gentle with it a little bit. And I've done that. I've pounded them out. Now we're going to get our clip in. Make sure that pin's seated all the way in. Double check to make sure you got the piston on right. Now there's only one side on this clip, so I'm just going to get part of it in. And I hear it clipped in. I'm going to spin that little tang to the bottom. And I know it's riding in the groove down in here. I don't have a compressor tool, which they do make. I just use my fingers. And a lot of times when you're putting the jug on, you can see it through the ports, but unfortunately you can't really see it on this one. So just have, if it doesn't go on good, the rings are not in the right spot. So we're going to get a little more oil on the piston. Alright. Now if you want, get your cylinder gasket, install that. This is kind of a symmetrical gasket, so it can go on either way. And luckily it fits over the rings. Sometimes that doesn't happen. You got to put this gasket on first before you put your rings on. I'm actually going to put a little two-stroke oil where that gasket goes. Sometimes it helps to release it if you got to get down in here and work on it again. Alright. Looks like I got that on right. Put a little oil in the cylinder. You don't need too much because it's going to drip everywhere. I'm going to start on the first ring. I'm going to get it kind of started and compressed with my fingers and centered. I kind of just fit half the ring on, and I just press it in with my fingernail, and I got the first one in. And you can twist it now. So I'm going to get the second ring in here, which is a little tougher. You might have to use a screwdriver. And I've got it on. That's as easy as it can get. Alright, so we're just going to put this down all the way. Make sure our exhaust side is on our exhaust side. Slides down nice and easy, so we know that our rings are in right. Try to line up the holes a little bit so the bolts go in better. And there it is. It's all together. I just got to find my bolts and stuff, and I'll keep continuing here. So any guys that are out there that are accumulating parts for these and trying to find some information on rebuilding or what have you, 285s, 2100s, and 1100s, according to this little service manual I've got, they've got a grading on the cylinders and the pistons. There's A, there's B, and there's C. So for instance, this is a 285 cylinder. It's kind of on the side on this one, but it's right here. It's a B, letter B, and there's a piston here. That's also a letter B. It's up on top. I'm sure this isn't really dire on these, but I got reading this manual one night, and something I didn't know. If you're trying to pair an oddball piston you got somewhere with a cylinder, you want to make sure that the piston and cylinder have the same letter. A with an A, B with a B, C with a C, so on and so forth. Some other saws go from A to E. A cylinder is I believe the largest diameter. So you can't put, or no, it's the smallest diameter, sorry. A is the smallest. So you can't put a B piston in an A cylinder. It's a little too big. Yeah, they're 56 millimeters or 52 or whatever saw you have. But the diameter on the piston is just a hair too big. It's going to be a little too tight in the saw. Now, if you got an old saw and it's got a little wear in it, you might be able to get away with it. And, you know, it's kind of getting a little anal with that, but at the end of the day, you kind of want to be careful. And to the other side of that, you know, these are just old chainsaws, so, you know, you're just doing a junkyard build, you know, just slap it together, I suppose. But I thought I'd just add that in there. Kind of neat information, I thought. So that's that. The other thing is you can put a 285 cylinder on one of these if you can't find a 2100 or 298. 298, 2100 is 56 millimeters, and a 285 is 52 millimeters. So, yeah, that's the difference there. So, this is a cool manual I found. It's like a 6th edition. It's kind of like a Chilton's automotive thing, but just for chainsaws. And it has diagnostics and how to take things apart. You know, home light, McCulloch, Husqvarnas, and all types of other stuff. So it's kind of neat. Chain information. If you ever find one of these, pick it up. Definitely cool to look through if you're into this type of stuff. You'll definitely learn something just kind of browsing through it. I work on antique cars, and I find myself always going back to those old Chilton manuals. There's just a lot of information, and at the same time, you got to buy a bunch of them because a lot of times they're kind of missing information where other ones have some, and they're just handy. You know, the internet isn't everything, so you can always go back to books. They're out there, and I got a little more brazing to do on that, flattening it out, and I think the next episode I'll do the pressure test on this. So, thanks for watching. I hope this helped you. If you got any questions, leave a comment. Hit that like button, and why don't you subscribe? More videos like this. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.